So you decided to take up running, or you're coming back from an injury, and you want to be able to use the Maffetone method to build a good aerobic base. Look, there are some pros and cons to this method, and I want to share with you what those are, because I don't want you to go through this training process and then abandon it thinking it's not going to work. Here are the pros of using the Maffetone method. The first one is building a rock solid aerobic base. After 40, our bodies don't bounce back quite like they used to. So the Maffetone method keeps you in that, that low moderate heart rate. We often call it zone 2. So you're strengthening your aerobic system without hammering your joints or your central nervous system. And it's something that you can continue to do over and over. Over time, that means you create more mitochondria for your muscles, like specifically your cells, better fat burning, and you'll probably notice that you can run longer at a very comfortable rate without bonking. Lower injury and burnout risk. When you're younger, it's kind of tempting to chase the fast-paced workouts with every session that you do, but once you hit 40, the recovery takes longer, and soft tissues and tendons and ligaments, they get, not so happy. Training mostly at your aerobic threshold keeps the wear and tear down on your body. This is something that I've found to be true. Now, this may not happen for everybody, but you'll likely avoid the nastier overuse injuries like plantar fasciitis issues, Achilles flare-ups, IT band flare-ups that pop up if you push too fast too soon. Like I said, everyone's different, so keep that in mind. The great thing is it teaches you to run by feel. And that is really important for me anyways. If you're like me, you've probably spent large parts of your day staring at your pace charts, your GPS or interval session clocks, timers, STRAVA. Now the Maffetone method really forces you to, really tune in to your breathing, your heart rate, perceived effort. It also helps you kind of rediscover, the feel of what it's like to run longer and smarter, and put yourself in a position where you don't pick up those issues that come when you're running faster. Especially after 40, listening to your body becomes crucial. That niggling issue that happened in my calf or in my glute that feels a bit off, you can get that addressed before it turns into like more of a 6-week layoff. And that's something that I've actually caught very, very quickly, and I've dealt with it, and it's good now. Improved fat loss and weight management, I'll tell you, it's super important. And that's my fourth point of the pros of using the Maffetone method. Look, hormone shifts after 40, and it makes losing fat harder. And by keeping the workouts in that aerobic zone, usually I find between 110 to maybe 145, depending on your exact age, like 180 minus your age calculation. That's what we talk about when we talk about using the Maffetone method. Your body becomes more efficient at burning fuel when in that aerobic zone. Now, I hope you can't hear all the noise that's going on because it's constant right now. I got planes going on, I got construction going on over here. But anyways, hopefully this, microphone that I'm using doesn't cause any problem. If you're like me and you're battling that stubborn midlife weight gain, or you just want to lean out a little bit with less high energy sessions, the Maffetone method can help drop the extra weight. Okay, it really works well when you combine it with eating extremely well, and you're preserving your muscle when you run at these lower speeds, so to speak. But just make sure you tie it into your diet, because without it, it still works, but it just doesn't. You can really accelerate it if you start to burn it at both ends. Number 5 is stress reduction, and it's more of a mental reset. Look, doing long, easy runs feels almost meditative for me, specifically if you pick more some of these scenic routes. And that stress factor, oh my gosh, all this noise. That stress relief factor can't be overstated. 40 plus often means busier jobs, family, demands. Look, it's a laundry list of errands, honey-do lists, whatever you want to call it. There's so many things going on in life because you got to keep your boss happy, you got to keep your wife happy, you got to keep, wait a minute, sometimes my wife is my boss. Anyways, sometimes I have to keep everybody happy, and that can be a challenge sometimes. So reducing the risk of stress is an important aspect to all of this. It's a gentle reminder that aerobic zone run can clear your mind. It can give you a dopamine hit without the cortisol spikes and keep your mental game strong rather than burned out from constant speed works. Because that's also happened to me too. So I have to keep these things in mind because I have to make sure that I'm training for the specific race that I'm doing and I'm not overtraining or undertraining, because anyways, we'll get into that point a little later on. Look, the Maffetone method isn't all sunshines and rainbows. There are some cons. And the first one is frustratingly slow progress at first. Look, if you've been chasing STRAVA PRs, look, that can be very frustrating when you're only running at 130, 140 heartbeat, right? It can feel infuriating. Running a 7-minute kilometer pace or 6:30 kilometer. Look, you want to be, it gets very frustrating. You want to be begging to go out and do those faster speed works. But sometimes you just got to hold it back. Look, over 40, patience is a virtue, right? It gets tested even more and more. And you might, do weeks of slow runs before seeing any improvement at the same low heart rate. And that's a tough pill to swallow. Our brains want to see results now, but it doesn't happen like that. We're not that simple of a species. We're more complicated than that. Which leads into number 2, potential for undertraining. This is a very true thing. So if you never inject a little bit of high-speed intensity work, even once a week, you might hit a ceiling. I've heard a number of Maffetone purists say no speed work at all, but many coaches do recommend at least one tempo or threshold session now and then, specifically if you want to keep your VO2 max from slipping. However, you can still hold on to your VO2 max by running slow, but adding in a lot more distance. But you're not going to see crazy results, but you will be able to hold a little bit of it. And maybe even gain a little bit, because I know I've done it in the past. Over 40, aerobic capacity does decline gradually. So if you stick 100% to low heart rate sessions, you could see race times start to stagnate or notice late race fatigue because your body never learned how to handle the faster efforts. And again, it's something that I have learned myself. So you do have to sprinkle those faster speeds in once you build a good aerobic base. Number 3 is heart rate variability and atypical readings. Look, what I mean by this is medication, mild hypertension, or even leftover injuries can skew heart rate readings. Look, even if your resting heart rate is elevated, common if you're a bit stressed with work and family demands, or you've gone through a bad eating cycle, and then the 180 minus the age may be too high or too low for your unique physiology. Look, you're likely going to have to tinker with this. Maybe subtract 5, 10 beats if you're on certain medications or have a history of cardiac issues. Trial and error process can be annoying, specifically if you're the type that wants a clear, this is what you got to do formula and that you're not going to deviate from. But again, it doesn't work like that. Some of us, it works beautifully like that, but others, maybe not so much. This is a big one. Number 4 is lack of variety and the monotony of doing the same thing over and over again. So imagine doing all your runs at the same relaxed effort for months on end. After 40, your body appreciates the consistency, but your brain is going to be getting dragged through the mud. It's going to be like, this is not good. It's going to kill my motivation. I might start accidentally sneaking in the higher heart rate just for a change of pace. And I can point to me because that actually kind of happens a lot more than I would like to admit. Now, if you thrive on those fartleks, on the speed sessions, on the hill sprints, or group tempo runs, or you're already using them, switching entirely to slow, steady state running can feel like, oh my God, what are you talking about? I can't do that. Over 40, staying engaged mentally is just as important as the physical adaptations. Number 5, it doesn't address the strength or mobility gaps. And what I mean by that is the Maffetone method is all about the aerobic system. But if you're 40 plus with stiff hips or a weak core, you need to complement that with strength training, mobility work. Relying solely on the Maffetone runs might leave you susceptible to muscle imbalances, biomechanical issues. And again, I'm pointing at me because that's exactly what happened. You can't continually do the same thing over and over again. You do have to have variety. So you'll want to layer in at least 1 or 2 strength sessions per week, okay? I know, again, that's something I've been doing. So think glute, hip strength, core, stability, calf resistance. Otherwise, you could develop complications like extra knee stress, or a really cranky lower back, if you know what I mean. Specifically if you're logging those longer miles, because you're logging those extra long miles without reinforcing support for the muscle side of things, yeah, that's something for the injury box. Again, you got to listen to your body, because something, again, I've gone through, and I just don't want you to go through it because it's not a good place to be. Now, here are a few extra tips for all you 40 plus runners using or trying to use the Maffetone method. Number 1 is, look, you have to adjust that 180 formula if needed, right? The standard 180 minus your age, look, that equals your MAF heart rate. That's what you're going to be running for, right? So if you're like a 45-year-old runner, that'll be 135 beats. But if you've been, constantly running and you've been improving and you've got it dialed in, look, maybe you add another 5. And if you're in great shape or have a history of solid training, maybe you can nudge it up just a little bit more, because we all want to inflate the ego. Otherwise, err on the side of caution, but just know it's not a linear line. Number 2 is be realistic about your time commitment. Look, to see the gains that I've seen, using the Maffetone method, it does call for longish runs, like 60 to 90 minutes of that slow, easy running. And that can be a lot if you're trying to squeeze in workouts between work, kid drop-offs, grocery runs, planning your week. At least 2 longer sessions. That's what you'll need to do. Maybe 1 on the weekend and 1 on a quieter midweek morning before work. Again, it's just something you're going to have to kind of play around with. And if you pair that with strength and mobility, then you're looking at some pretty cool things. So if you're over 40, bone density, tendon elasticity, muscle mass all may decline gradually, slowly. So slot in 20 to 30 minute strength sessions per week, focusing on glutes, hips, core, upper back, lower back, throw in some basic hip openers, ankle mobility drills. All of these things will help bulletproof your legs for those long, slow, monotonous Maffetone miles. Number 4, though, is we also want to celebrate the small wins. And maybe at first you can only do like a 5 kilometer at MAF pace, right? Again, talking about maybe a 7-minute kilometer, or celebrate in 4 to 6 weeks. You might be crushing it at, 6:30, the same low heart rate. Maybe those percentages improve, over time. Maybe it takes even longer, but log those incremental paces and improvements. They will come, and you're going to be stoked when you start to see those results. Eventually, number 5 is you have to spice in a bit of speed, okay? Again, I've fallen into this gap so many times. And so once you've been on MAF for like 8 to 12 weeks and your aerobic, base maybe caps out, maybe you want to start running a little bit faster than MAF, right? But adding those in with, a tempo 1 week, maybe do hill sprints the next week. That way you preserve a strong base, but it also reminds your fast twitch muscle fibers that, look, they're still here. They still exist, because you always want to send them a little bit of love. Bottom line, when I talk about all of this, is if you crave faster race times, but you are riddled with niggles or injuries or recovery issues, look, the Maffetone method can breathe a breath of fresh air, specifically after 40, when these little twinges take longer to heal. Giving your body a little bit of love will go a long way. So if you're a performance junkie who literally wants to feel that lactic acid burn with each session, then pure Maffetone method may feel like a snail's pace, and it may leave you itching for maybe running something harder. And maybe it's not for you. But most 40 plus runners I know find sweet success, if they lean into the Maffetone method for a base phase of, let's say, 8 to 12 weeks. Maybe it goes longer, because I've done longer too. Primarily low heart rate, and then blending in some traditional workouts as you get closer to race day. And that way you can capitalize on all the pros, right? Injury prevention, fat burning, mental chill out, right? And you also want to minimize the cons, right? Stagnant pace, boredom. Now, what I would say is good luck out there when you're running. And you always got to remember, slow and steady may actually win the midlife runner's race. One thing that I can say for certain, after using the Maffetone method for 5 years, I've learned a lot. And there's no 2 days that are ever going to be the same. And that's something that you're going to have to overcome. You got to get out of your head, because the fact of the matter is, being a human being is very complicated. We all know that, right? We try to do as much as we can for our own physical well-being. And when we're trying to improve ourselves, some things may fall by the wayside, and that may be stressful. But you also have to know why you're doing what you're doing. Because if you don't have a big enough why, you'll never be able to endure any how at all. And again, that's something that I've learned. This method is not for everybody. It can be one of the most frustrating things, but it can be also one of the most liberating things. And what I mean by that is, sometimes you just don't have to think about what your run is going to look like, because you're just going to go out and run at that slow, you're going to run at the same low heart rate every day for months. I did it, and I got faster. You can too. Maybe not see the same results as me, but that's okay, because you're not me and I'm not you. And that's what makes this process so enriching, frustrating, but so liberating. I'm grateful for it, because it allowed me to get my mojo back. It allowed me to get out and do the things that I enjoy. I love running. I think it's one of the most amazing things, and I think everybody could become a runner and could change their life drastically, or maybe just a little bit. But you'll never know unless you start. I've got a lot of videos on my channel, and if you click on the 2 on your screen here, I think they'll help if you're thinking about using this method. So follow along for a whole lot of other videos that I'm going to be coming out. If you want to follow along on my journey to run another marathon, to shed the 50 pounds I got that I'd like to lose, if you're game, so am I, because that's my plan. Being an older runner is not an easy thing, but I'm okay with that. God, today is beautiful. I love running. So let's get out there and make the best of it. Like I always say, get out and run. See you on the next one.